land acknowledgement that will be hosted and shared with by Megan Olstrom. She is our Vice President and Head of Education Committee. Uh, then I will open up with a welcome from the CEM Youth Engagement Committee head. That would be me. Also the Secretary Head and Youth Engagement Committee. And at 7:40 to the 8:20 time slot, we have introduction of each party candidate and presentation of their environmental platform. For 7:40, 7:50, we did invite the Conservatives. And so since they are not on the Zoom call, we will give up time to the next presentations. We'll adjust the time limit for Janine Gibson. She will begin her presentation at the 8:10 and 8:20 time slot instead of Leah Gazan, and we will begin the presentations with the Liberal Party of Canada, Rahul Walia. At 8:20 till 8:45, we have a question and answer session. 25 minutes is allotted. And at 8:45 till 8:55, final statements from candidates and representatives will last for 2.5 minutes each for their final statements. And then at 8:55, we will have our President June Sales end with some closing remarks for SEM. And so I ask Anne, are you able to change it to the next slide?
Yes.
Megan, go ahead.
Thank you, Chris. It is an honor to be asked to do the land acknowledgement. And we acknowledge that we are gathered on Treaty 1 territory and that Manitoba is located on the treaty territories and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, Dene peoples, and the birthplace and homeland of the Red River Métis. We also acknowledge that our water is sourced from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation. We witness the ongoing legacy of colonial oppression, systematic racism, and violence. We endeavor to cultivate self-awareness and unlearn misperceptions that reinforce discrimination of Indigenous peoples. We respect the spirit and intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth and reconciliation for the healing and inclusion of all who share this land. Miigwech. Thank you very much, and I'll pass the mic back to Chris. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan, for your leadership on the land acknowledgement. Coming from a settler background, I just want to honor the land that I stand on, and having that land acknowledgement is something that is meaningful for me as an immigrant. But Kamusta Maganda Gabi, everyone. Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day, everyone.
Who is able to make it to Caring for Our Environment, Manitoba's Federal Election 2025 forum tonight, which is happening on Earth Day, April 22nd, 2025. And this is no coincidence. My name is Chris Classio, and I will be the moderator for tonight's forum. I'm also the official SEM Youth Engagement Head and the Secretary of the Board. We have hosted one other forum with community partners back during the 2021 federal election about the environment. To clarify to all attendees and candidates, how we selected tonight's speakers of the respective party is through previous forum back in 2021 and previous relationships to candidates who attended the last forum. And considering how short the window of this federal election, time is of the essence. We sent all candidates a draft guidelines of protocols of the forum ahead of tonight's event. 1. Respectful conduct. Federal candidates or representatives must engage in civil and respectful discussions. Time limits. 2. Each speaker is allowed 10 minutes each for their presentation of their respective platforms, including the introduction, and 2.5 minutes for their final statements. 3. Speaking turns. Party candidates, representatives may only speak when recognized by the moderator. Interruptions are not allowed. 4. Evidence or fact-based statements. Statements should be supported by credible evidence and sources. Misrepresentation of facts or spreading information is prohibited. 5. Moderation authority. The moderator oversees discussions, enforces time limits, and ensures adherence to rules and maintain order. 6. Audience participation. The audience may submit questions for the speakers, but direct engagement or disruptions are not permitted. These 6 items, to sum it all up, is for all audience to understand that this forum, which is to be an informational conversation about the environment and not a debate. We want to listen and engage.
Mhm.
I would like to thank the fellow board members for allowing me to be elected onto the board of CEM. I
Mhm.
had recently joined and began my journey with the organization at the beginning of January 2025. In the first inaugural meeting, they supported me to become secretary and youth engagement head of the board.
Mhm.
CEM was established on World Environment Day on June 5th, 2017. CEM is a registered nonprofit organization. We will be celebrating our 8 years on June 5th, 2025. CEM envisions a society that is low carbon, sustainable, equitable, wherein lifestyle and consumption patterns respect the carrying capacity of our Mother Earth for the benefit of present generations and those to come. CEM wants to enable Filipino community and the broader society to make informed choices and decisions through awareness and relevant knowledge, collaboration, and build meaningful partnerships with organizations in Manitoba and beyond to share resources and expertise to achieve common objectives. On our website, my bio reads, Chris Clasio was born and raised in Winnipeg in 1992. Their first family members started immigrating from the Philippines to Canada in 1974. They have been running for public office since 2014 and at different levels of government over the years. They are trained as an emotional intelligence practitioner, as well as being known as a civic practitioner and a policy entrepreneur within the broader Winnipeg community. For tonight, we have Janine Gibson representing the Green Party of Canada. We have Rahul Walia for the Liberal Party of Canada and Leah Gazan for the NDP. We also extended the invitation to 2 separate Conservative Party of Canada candidates as well.
Mhm.
The order of presentation will be alphabetical, but we will give the Green Party the last spot for time reasons. And so the first presentation and the first speaker representing is the Liberal Party, Rahul Walia. Go ahead, Rahul.
Thank you
You have
very
10
much.
minutes.
Oh,
And
perfect.
I will also give a hands up mark for your 1 minute timeline.
Awesome. Were we able to get the slides up too, or did you just want me to speak?
I will be, yeah, Rahul, 1 second. I'm going to share the slide that you shared with us. Is this the right one? Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Yep. Amazing. Well, good evening, bonsoir, et mabuhay to everyone. Of course, right? My name is Raul Walia. I'm the Liberal candidate for Winnipeg Centre. So just a bit of background on me. I was born and raised, and I'm a proud resident of Winnipeg Centre. I also have got my bachelor's and master's degree in political management from Carleton University, and my work experience is also related to environment in some degrees. I first started off working with the late Senator Murray Sinclair, where I learned about Indigenous reconciliation and sovereignty. I then got to work with Terry Duguid when he was the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Environment. And one of the biggest things I'd say that we got done in that time was having the Canada Water Agency placed in Winnipeg, which was a very big deal. And I'll be talking about that soon in my remarks. And I was also the regional advisor for Transport Canada. And one of the biggest, I think, programs there when it comes to the environment is the Green Shipping Corridors Fund. And we had a lot of projects there that, help with the environment in ways such as with shore power. A lot of cruise ships on both coasts were emitting diesel when they were just idling at ports. And so we've, as a Liberal government, but also at Transport Canada, we made funding available for those things. So I just want to talk about since 2015 what the Liberal government has done, and we've made record investments, but also we were Canada's first ever we introduced Canada's first ever climate plan in 2016. And we were the first government to do that. We invested over $100 billion towards climate action and clean growth, and took action to get net zero emissions by 2050 and enshrine this goal into law. We also banned harmful single-use plastics and committed to that by 2030. And we've already banned microbeads in toiletries. We've also laid out a plan for planting 2 billion trees and gave rebate programs to those who wanted to make their homes more efficient, with grants from 5,000 but up to 100,000. And Canadians were able to do this for their homes, but also for their vehicles as well. And we've committed to ensuring, 100% of the vehicles sold in Canada will be zero emission by 2035. So very ambitious plans, but we have, a lot of manufacturing that comes to Canada that will be doing a lot of that, like Honda, for example. And we've been very serious about our investments up until that point, and going on with our investments into national urban parks. And there's plans for one to be held right in Winnipeg too, and those are still underway. And we've done a lot of things in order to help businesses start to be very cognizant and mindful of zero emission products. And so we've cut taxes for businesses that would manufacture zero emission products to really incentivize that push to a more greener economy. And you'll see that with Mark Carney, and I'll go to the next slide here. Yeah, if we could. So Mark Carney has a very nice resume. He's a PhD in climate economy, and he's a climate economist himself. He was the UN Special Envoy for climate action and the economy. So he's a very mindful person when it comes to this. And so I think we have a very great leader who is very serious about the environment. And you'll see that, we have a very immediate threat right now as Canada with President Trump. And he more than wants our sovereignty, but he wants our resources. And our resources includes our water. He wants to weaken us so that he can own us. And I believe with the plan that Mark Carney has, we're not only being serious about our environmental commitments, but also to protect Canada's sovereignty. So we want to do that by protecting more nature, advancing the creation of at least 10 new national parks and marine protected areas, and building upon the urban parks that was discussions from 2021. That also includes to conserve 30% of lands and waters by 2030. Going forward in that, the Canada Water Agency will also be working towards strengthening our national water stewardship by helping with fresh action water plans, using investments into a technology fund to advocate for the development of Canadian research and development to help monitor and analyze and data all these tools at our disposal. Furthermore, we're launching the Canadian National Nature Protection Fund to help restore old growth forests. And we're going to be helping for every dollar that Canadian businesses and Canadians and philanthropists contribute, the federal government will match that up to $250 million. So we're very serious about conservation and supporting with Indigenous leaders and leadership. We're expanding the Indigenous Guardians program to include 50 new Arctic Indigenous Guardians, which will help support environmental monitoring. And we want to be a champion of this internationally as well by stopping the illegal wildlife trade across borders. And one of the big things that, as today's Earth Day that isn't sort of mentioned in this, for young people especially, which will be really good, is that we are announcing the Youth Climate Corps, which I think has been long overdue and well welcomed by young people. This will provide paid skills trainings for young Canadians to prepare them for a changing climate and the climate emergencies that occur. Especially in Manitoba, we've seen with wildfires over the summer how it can have a damaging impact, but also what we saw in Jasper. So we really need to be cognizant and mindful and about how we respond to disasters and how we can be preventative rather than be reactionary. I'll also include that we're connecting Canadians with nature to really encourage them by having the Canada Strong Pass to have a free access to national parks this summer. So those are the things that we have in store as a Liberal government. And, we have a leader that's very serious and has a good reputation, but also the resume that shows his seriousness to climate. And That's us for the Liberal Party. So I just wanted to take the time to say thank you so much for inviting me and to speak on this, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Rahul. The next up is at the NDP candidate, Leah Gazan. Come on up.
Mabuhay, everyone. Good to see you, friends, again. Nice to see you, Chris. It's been a minute, but glad I could join you tonight. One of the reasons I decided to run in 2019 was I was worried about the climate crisis. I'm running on my own record, fighting for climate justice, fighting for human rights, including the right to a clean, safe, sustainable environment as a human right. That's one of the reasons, one of my first order of business when I was elected in 2019 was to put forward my private members bill to recognize that right. Because I have to say this election with Trump and the tariffs, we seem to have lost sight to the fact that we are in a climate emergency. And I agree with you, Chris. This is the existential threat of our time. The Liberals and Conservatives propositions are literally sacrificing in terms of their focus on quick development. They are literally favoring the economy at the cost of our earth. And let's not forget that the climate crisis in Canada by choosing not to protect our mother that provides us with life. One of the concerns that I have specifically is around the accelerated development that both Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney have spoken about building projects faster and what that means for environmental protection and what that means to the social impacts. Are they proposing a faster environmental assessment and review? And at what cost? At an expedient propositioning as faster environmental assessment and review at the state of Indigenous rights, free, prior, informed. And what is free, prior, and informed consent? Free, prior implies that there is no coercion or intimidation or manipulation. Prior implies that consent is to be sought sufficiently in advance of any authorization or commitment of activities. Informed implies that communities and nations know what they are signing on to before it happens. Informed implies that communities have been provided with the information required of the project plans and activities and the impacts prior to any sort of development taking place. Because we know that most of the impacts to all the mining and resource projects that the government has proposed will be within or around Indigenous communities, will impact Indigenous communities throughout Canada. And it's not just Indigenous communities and our own lands within Turtle Islands that will be impacted by development. It is also the global South, and places like the Philippines that has been impacted by the greed of the North that is currently causing climate catastrophes at a time where we're going to witness more and more environmental refugees. Canada is closing the door. We cannot do that at this time. And it seems to me that corporate interests seem to be the subject of the day, letting corporations come into
Leah, you're on mute.
story. And let's not forget that resource development happens around Indigenous territories at the impact of Indigenous communities. And at the risk of community safety, I piloted a study in the Status of Women Committee correlating the connection between increased violence against Indigenous women and girls and resource extraction. Companies coming into our communities, mining companies coming into communities, resource companies coming into our communities, and the uptick of violence to Indigenous women and girls. And let's not forget, that's not just in Canada, that's happening globally with Canadian mining companies that have reaped the benefits internationally on the backs of Indigenous people. And I say that because I know that there's a lot of talk on reconciliation. And I know that there's a commitment of this group to reconciliation. Chris, I've known you for years, and I know your dedication to reconciliation. Calls to action 43 and 44 as calls on the federal, provincial, and municipal government to adopt and implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People as a framework for reconciliation. Yet, in the political announcements we've heard to date, we've heard about rushing through environmental assessments, paying for providing benefits to Indigenous communities that want to sign on to resource projects. But part of free, prior, and informed consent means that we have a right to say no, as we're seeing in the Ring of Fire in Ontario, where Ontario chiefs are standing up and saying no development will happen within our territories without free, prior, and informed consent. So I want to speak to the rights of Indigenous people and the human rights of all peoples, the human rights of all peoples to have a safe, clean, and healthy environment as a human right, something that has been recognized in over 100 countries in the world, something that Canada needs to recognize. That's why I'm really proud of the NDP and the fact that they're putting forward an environmental bill of rights to recognize the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, not as something that is trendy, but something that is needed in the world, to recognize a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as a human right, especially for racialized, indigenized, and Black communities that bear the brunt of environmental racism, whether it is in Canada or around the world. That is why the NDP is putting forward a proposal for the Office of Environmental Justice, because we know the folks that are most impacted by an attack on our biodiversity is Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And to put in place, using our military, to put in place a wildlife fighting force. We know places like Lytton, BC, where the whole community blew up in flames because of our climate emergency. We know that we need a wildfire fighting force, not to deal with it after the fact, but deal with it when the crisis occurs. And the importance of youth within that fight. The NDP is proposing 500,000 for a youth climate corps. And although there's a lot of talk from the other parties about Indigenous human rights that center around our human rights, I have to say that the money that they currently spend, 500 to $1 million or $1 billion fighting Indigenous people in courts, could be used to fight our climate crisis. The 500,000 to $1 billion they use to fight against Indigenous people, mostly around resource extraction projects, reaping the benefits, leaving polluted waters, territories around Indigenous communities, they could be spending on giving us real options for investing in sustainable solutions. The 500 million to $1 billion they fight Indigenous people, including this Liberal government. Let's develop true partnerships that uphold the human rights of all peoples, whether it's in urban centers or Indigenous communities or communities to the global south who are suffering the impacts of the greed from the north. Let's lift up human rights and let's celebrate Earth Day by providing a framework that honors a clean, healthy, and safe environment as a human right.
Okay, right on time.
Thank you so much, Leah. Gazan. Next up is Janine Gibson. Anne, are you able to put up the CBC platform of the Green Party that we have on our slide for Janine?
Yes, of course.
That would be helpful. I just want to begin by thanking you as organizers for having this together. And Leah, that was a very moving and exciting presentation that you made. I wish that your party would follow through on everything that you've outlined, because it would be excellent. So just want to share my congratulations there. So I am running in Portage Lisgar for the Green Party of Canada and have been a member for many, many years. I actually used to be a very active member with the NDP and then felt that their green policies were just not addressing the issues that we really have. Their policies were not getting us, just as the Liberals also, getting us to the 60% by 2030 that we need to have net zero by 2050. So that is why I became active with the Green Party. I support the social justice issues that the NDP have put forward and completely agree with the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People that there needs to be much more informed consultation, and we need to address the ways in which pollution and environmental damage is borne primarily by First Nations people and people of color, not only in Canada, but around the world. So I acknowledge that we are functioning in a democratic system that is quite colonial in its structure, and we need to make these changes. And the Green Party not only has some concrete goals, such as the 60% cut emissions by 60% by 2030, so that we can meet our net zero by 2050, but that we really want to support a more collegial practices between provinces. So that's investing more in our east-west national electric grid so that we can reduce some of our provincial demands on nuclear and coal and look at how we can make true hydroelectricity more sustainable and more green, because I am aware that many of our First Nations populations in Manitoba have paid a very high price for this hydroelectricity. And I think treating Lake Winnipeg like a spillage basin, a catchment basin, does not respect Turtle Island, does not respect the important role that Lake Winnipeg plays in our ecosystem, does not protect the biodiversity that needs to be honored. And this was a major reason why I've spent the last 32 years of my life working to support the family farm and to help family farms convert to more organic production methods so that we can be truly green in the way that we produce our food. So we want to, in terms of respecting our east-west national electric grid, we want to respect Quebec's opposition to pipelines and remove barriers to the interprovincial trade that exists now. We really have to stop funding the polluters. We have a polluters pays policy in the Green Party. And we call to halt all new fossil fuel projects by 2050. Stop giving public money to oil and gas companies and instead invest not only in renewable energy, but invest in the traditional caretakers, the water protectors that our First Nations populations across the country, and especially here in Manitoba, have an important role to play. And we need to work with our First Nations Turtle Island caretakers to be more responsible in addressing the ways that we take energy from the earth, not only in our agriculture, but also in our energy structure. So more investment in renewable energy. We really think that it's important to create a new national emergency response agency. And we see that in terms of young people, so that we see that in order to create the bold action to protect the people and the places we love in Canada, we know that we're having extreme fires and floods destroying Canadian communities. I, in fact, just drove through Lytton, BC last week on my way to inspect some organic dairies and some organic beef production up in the mountains. And so have seen the clear cutting, how the sides of the mountains slide down when it's clear cut, that there needs to be more selective forest management, respecting some of the traditional ways our First Nations people have managed the forests. So our governments really need to listen more deeply to the knowledge keepers of our First Nations populations in order to build a better clean energy and to protect Canadians from future climate disasters. We really believe that we can lead the world in an energy future because of the amount of sun, wind, and water power we have in abundance. I have been privileged to live off the grid without hydroelectricity, with using solar and wind for the last 35 years of my life, because I feel so strongly about this. Manitoba almost always has sun and wind, as well as our wonderful hydroelectricity that we're blessed with. If we could just be more respectful of the environment around the riparian areas of the lakes and the rivers, so that we get any hydroelectricity with respect. So let's see. Oh, sorry, am I still with you? I seem to have lost the...
Yes, we can still hear you.
Okay, good. So could we move on to the next? You have another slide for me, I believe? Or is that the only... Because I wanted to talk about our Green Party. Yes, we really believe in making the polluters pay. Big companies have made climate change worse, and now they must help fix it. So some of the key steps we'll take is stop giving public money to oil and gas companies and invest in clean energy instead. Hold big polluters responsible for the climate damage they cause. Create strict science-based limits on Canada's total pollution, and make companies prove they have real plans to deal with the climate crisis. Many corporations talk about being good neighbors. We want to see that put into action. And just as we're moving to not allow politicians to lie, at the Green Party, we've made commitments to truthfulness in our candidacies. We also believe that we must have a plan that matches the crisis that we're in. So just like past national emergencies, we have to think big and act fast. So our plans are to cut pollution and make life more affordable, creating good jobs, especially green jobs for young people who we can engage to help protect our communities and build the kind of future that we think we all want to share. So it looks like we're back to the same slide that I started with. I've just been talking to some of our policies. Could I have another slide, please, if you have another one available for me?
I have one slide.
Okay, one for each. That's fine. That's fine. So I'll just continue to say that I was very pleased to hear the acknowledgement of our water coming from Shoal Lake First Nation, because the water keepers in Manitoba are playing a very important role in trying to protect our water in the face of an environmental act and a mining act that is very weak in Manitoba. So even though we're talking about Green Party of Canada work, we have to work both nationally to ensure that we support the provinces in having strong environmental acts and strong mining acts, so that we don't destroy our natural environment in seeking to maximize profit in the short term. Sometimes it takes a little bit of short-term pain for long-term gain. And I fully have striven to live by the First Nations instruction of thinking 7 generations ahead. So not only what can I do today that will help our grandchildren, but what will help our great, great, great grandchildren. And I know I certainly have much respect and honor for my ancestors that worked so hard to live. I have primarily Irish ancestors that were very much affected by colonialism and the dangers of monocropping. The Irish potato famine was caused by too much growing of one commodity, one kind of potato. So a lack of diversity, just like a lack of diversity in our politics and our policymakers is a problem, so it also is in our food production and our environments. So the Green Party supports diversity on all levels, the macro level and the micro level. And in this way, we can be more creative in the way we nourish our soils as we produce food and nourish each other. It's very important that as we move towards a greener Canada, a more sustainable Canada, that we look at transforming our agriculture, because it's been estimated that over 36% of our greenhouse gas emissions in Canada coming from chemical agriculture. So the Green Party is one of the only parties that strongly supports organic agriculture, which is using more traditional methods where you feed the soil and build the soil through recycling nutrients and ensuring that there is a true biodiversity in the soil and above the soil. A lot of folks don't understand there's more than, in a simple teaspoon of healthy organic soil, more than 1 billion different kinds of microorganisms, more different kinds of life under the soil than above it. And so the Green Party honors that diversity, both within the soil and above the soil. And so we ask to work towards a true reconciliation that does honor our First Nations water keepers and knowledge keepers, that we can grow together through embracing diversity of all cultures to take better care of our Mother Earth. Thank you for celebrating Earth Day today and inviting me here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Janine. Right on time as well. Look at our candidates, like everyone is on the dot for their 10
And
minutes.
we are ahead of time.
Yes, that's
So,
the great news. Yeah.
as a moderator of tonight, I have the privilege of saying a few words. We still have 2 minutes left, so I just want to honor the candidates tonight, because I've actually known all three candidates at different events, and so I just want to honor their time and their effort. I've run for public office, and I know the hard work in the work that we do, and we are all trying to support one another, and that is the dream that CEM, Caring for Our Environment, hopes to envision for our future for the environment. And we will see all of you in community, and so I just want to say thank you. Anne, are we able to put on the question and answer slide on screen? I will just go through the process of how this will happen. For all the attendees, I encourage you to put in your questions in the chat group, in the chat. If you have any questions, please direct the question to all candidates. And we do have 10 questions that from the board to share with all the candidates, and I will select each candidate to speak, so that will allow us to be more efficient of our time. And so the first question I will share with folks is, let me get them, is number one. I will direct this first question to Janine. As you were speaking last, I will allow you to continue. Where does your party see Canada by 2030 and 2050 when it comes to cutting emissions and reaching climate goals? What specific steps will you take starting in your first year to stay on track for both the medium and long-term targets?
Really, we believe that in order to stay on track for the 2030 and the 2050, we have to stop. I mean, we just bought a pipeline. The Liberals just bought a pipeline not that long ago. We have to stop putting money into polluters. We have to stop spending money on the fossil fuel industry and start investing in more sustainable energy sources. So that is increased solar, increased wind, increased truly green hydroelectricity. And so the Green Party is not in a position where we'll likely have a lot of seats, but we will continue to be a strong voice, putting out ideas so that the decision makers can act quickly and effectively to ensure that we have 60% reduction of emissions by 2030. So we are on track to meet the 2050 emissions. And so we really believe that is green jobs, empowering young people to learn how to set up increased wind power and solar power, increased heat exchangers so that Canadians do not have to spend so much money on expensive heating. There are many alternatives. We just need to finance it. If we stop giving so much money to the chemical companies and to the oil and gas companies, we will have the money to fund these projects. Thank you so much, Chris.
Leah, I can repeat the question. Just let me know. And the questions are in the chat as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. Well, as Janine mentioned, the Liberals bought a pipeline. We need to stop funding big oil. In fact, the first bailout during the pandemic was to big oil. The NDP has called for stopping all fossil fuel subsidies and reinvesting that into green energy and green technology. And that can't happen without proper consultation with Indigenous peoples. I know everybody's talking about First Nations people, but I can tell you as an Indigenous person of these lands, one of the things that consecutive Liberal and Conservative governments have done is they have violated fundamental Indigenous rights, whether it was with the buying of a pipeline or what we see in Wet'suwet'en territory, something that I have called out within the House of Commons. We cannot have a climate plan without ensuring that we uphold the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples and the human rights outlined in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, whether that's on Turtle Island or throughout the globe. We are legally obliged to uphold our international obligations. And as I said before, to recognize a clean, healthy environment as a human right is a critical part of that process.
Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you, Chris. I'd say that the Liberals are still very serious about reaching the 2030 and 2050 goals. We've invested over $100 billion up until this point to reach that mark, but a lot of it also comes from the people too. I mean, if we look at Canada as on a per capita basis, we are some of the largest emitters as Canadians. Even though by and large, when we compare ourselves to China or India, we don't admit that much. But if everyone lived like a Canadian, then the world would be a much warmer planet. And so that's why our government is still very serious and committed to, helping ease off that load by providing incentives for people to, switch over from vehicles going into EVs and even retrofitting their homes and businesses. And that saves a lot of money, not only for people and consumers themselves, but, on the energy efficiency mark, it does wonders if you can really retrofit these aging buildings, especially in Winnipeg too, where we have a lot of homes and businesses that could really benefit from this. I think it's really just letting people know the ease of, transitioning off of certain things and being able to do that. And Mark Carney's also got a plan that is still very committed to tackling the biggest polluters. We still have our consumer price on pollution for the largest emitters in the country. And I think that we can go further on that, but that's what I would say to that.
Thank you. Second question is, how will your party ensure a just transition for workers and communities currently reliant on fossil fuel industries while creating sustainable jobs and building a cleaner, greener economy for everyone? Rahul, I'll go ahead.
I mean, when you see sort of like what's happening in the prairies in Alberta with hydrogen and potash, and I think there's a really good opportunity with high skill laborers for people who are riggers and who are in the oil and gas industry to sustainably come over to working in the sustainable job sector. And that's something that was been encouraged by Liberal government, by NRCan for years now. And I see that this being a step where we fund the trades and the skills that are needed by allowing people to get that certification, but also really encouraging businesses to transition over, which has sort of been our plan to incentivize. And so whether that be for cutting tax, for letting people go into net zero products, this is one of the ways that we would help workers transition over to be in less reliable or less reliant on fossil fuel industries.
Leah?
Well, I think, when we look at resource extraction, I mean, one of the issues is that no level of government has really honored the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous people, or really upheld the principle of UNDRIP. That's why any sort of environmental policy or environmental plan needs to be grounded in human rights. When we're talking about workers, one of the bills that I proposed, in fact, that was voted against by the Liberals and the Conservative government was to put in place a guaranteed livable basic income. That is a critical piece to moving towards a just economy. I've often said people don't love oil and gas. People love paying for their bills, feeding their families, paying their rent. If we want to give people real options, then we need to give them real resources to move into other sectors like the care economy. And we need to increase wages within those areas, the care economy, and provide them with training by providing them resources like a guaranteed livable basic income. I often say in Indigenous communities, we're provided with a false choice. You either sign on to resource extraction or you live in poverty. That's what I call a false choice. If we're really serious about reconciliation, then we will provide communities with real choices and real options so that we can not be so dependent on fossil fuel, the fossil fuel industry. And really, like, Canada has gone, to COP30. 30 years, we've seen the climate crisis escalate. Conferences where we still choose to not deal with the climate crisis. It's not that we don't have the solution. It's because we lack the political will. That's why it's important to have strong new Democrat voices that will push against the human rights violations of the federal government, that will push against the federal government who continues to buy pipelines and fund the fossil fuel industries. That's one of the reasons I'm running, because I was worried about the climate crisis. As a long-time climate activist prior to being elected, I am committed to continuing on that journey.
Thank you. Janine?
Well, I want to thank Leah for the many years of service that she has put towards the environment. I have to say, I wish all NDP were as dedicated to protecting our environment as Leah is. I have great respect for that, because I also believe that you cannot separate environmental justice from human justice, human rights. That we have to look at how we treat the least among us in our society for where we need to change. And that's the least is often the people with unstable income. So the Green Party totally supports a basic income guarantee. We also think there should be free tuition so that people can educate themselves and re-educate themselves in transitioning to a care economy away from oil and gas sector for if they have a job there, because I completely agree with Leah. People need enough money to live well. And we have a society today that has evolved that is very difficult for people to live in, because it is not a caring, love-based society, just as it does not respect the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the importance of equity in the way that we distribute resources. It's also important that we honor the small microorganisms in the soil and the small little shrews and all the little animals that contribute and play a very important role in the bioregions in which we live, that we are part of the natural world, and we have to shift away from an extractive economy that takes from the earth to one where we work together in respecting each other, the animals and the land, in a loving-based economy that is respectful of life and nurtures life through supporting good education and a basic income guarantee. We also think a green earth core. The Green Party suggests that just as in the Second World War, Canada funded a youth corps to make the changes, to change the industry so that we could deal with what was needed for the war effort to stop fascism. We think that this is as much, if not a greater issue today, to look at environmental and social justice together, ensuring that people in the land are both respected and the diversity is respected. Thank you.
The next question is 3. Canada has missed every climate target it has ever set. What makes your party's climate plan different? And how will you ensure real accountability and measurable progress this time around? Leah.
Thank you so much, Chris. And I think you're right. Certainly federally, they've missed every single climate target. But I can tell you a lot of folks are talking about reconciliation and Indigenous peoples here. I have spent my life, as you know, fighting to preserve our Mother Earth, fighting for environmental protection, fighting for Indigenous rights. Because one of the things that people often miss when we talk about the climate, particularly around Indigenous communities, is the ongoing violence against Indigenous women and girls that is perpetuated from resource companies and construction companies that come onto our lands, territories, to reap our resources and leave, violence and unrepairable climate impact to our lands. I am extremely concerned that both leading parties have talked about, quickening the environmental assessments. I have not heard the Liberals or Conservatives once talking about how they are going to do that in a way that honors Indigenous women and girls and our community from the dangers that many corporations and construction companies bring into our territories. Not one. And in the whole time the Liberal government has been in place, they have only responded to 2 calls to justice. If my voice, along with the NDP, wasn't in government, none of that would have happened. And I have to say it's disturbing because the same kind of violence we see on our lands, territories, and resources is the same kind of violence that's being perpetrated against Indigenous women and girls. That is the voice of bringing a strong Indigenous woman to Parliament. That is something that is not loosey-goosey talk about reconciliation, but lived experience on the front lines that brings that voice into Parliament. And I hope to continue doing that.
Rahul, go ahead.
I think from our side of things, we're taking everything as unity, given that what's happening around us, and working on all levels of government, but all peoples to also unite and come with a common goal here, which is to protect our sovereignty and protect our country. And I think you can really see that in our plan that's laid out. We constantly do mention the right for duty to consult, but also working with Indigenous partners in different levels, whether that be, to protect, but also expand our efforts in order to protect our environment and nature. I would say that also this time around, the biggest thing is to, protect water. One of the biggest things that's happening is we're going to have First Nations' rights to water enshrined into law, which is a very, very big thing. I would say something that I'm quite proud of our government being able to do. And so it's these serious commitments and having plans of what exactly we want to do rather than take it another direction or shift the conversation. We're really here talking about here's what our plan is, here's what we want to take care of, and this is the way to do it. And we have a lot of advancements in technology, but also the ability to have the opportunity to consult with people. These next 4 years will be difficult, but it's not impossible, and it'll take everyone and everyone's input in order to make sure that we keep Canada strong.
Thank you, Janine.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Canada has missed every climate target that it has ever set. What makes your party's climate plan different? And how will you
Well,
ensure real accountability and measurable progress this time around?
I really believe that one of the main problems with Canada achieving its climate targets is that our government is lobbied too heavily by corporations, just as our agriculture and agri-food Canada is heavily lobbied by Bayer and other chemical input companies. So is the government lobbied by big oil and big gas. And we need to change that, to listen to the people. And in this way, again, I heartily endorse what Leah has said, how we treat the least among us. And unfortunately, many of the least among us are First Nations women and girls. And the lack of enforcement of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirited, the calls to action, the lack of those calls to action, as we put those into place, we will see that we are also taking better care of the natural world. And that means less money to those that just want to take for personal profit and short-term profit, and more for the greater good, more ensuring the safety and health of communities, moving away from an extractive economy to a care-based economy, to ensuring that families have what they need. Again, a basic income guarantee, which is a primary tenet of the Green Party, is very important for this, so that we can educate people. I think the role the Green Party plays is largely one of education, where we strive to share the good word of taking care of one another, living responsibly, not only with the choices that we make as individuals, but that we look at how we're caring for our democracy. And to that end, I have to speak to the importance of moving away from first past the post system to proportional representation. That is very important for moving away from supporting the big business to supporting true human, environmental, and social justice. Thank you, Chris.
The next few questions, or the next one specifically, is about, we've talked a lot about water. And so the number 4 question is, how does your party plan to protect Canada's fresh water systems like Lake Winnipeg and the Great Lakes from pollution, overuse, and increased climate-related threats? I will pass it to Rahul.
Yeah, yes, of course. So, water is one of the biggest parts of our platform and what we want to protect. Water is a source of life. Water is very important to all peoples, but specifically Indigenous peoples as well. And I had mentioned earlier that we're going to have First Nations rights to water into law, but also using the Canada Water Agency for its full use. It was only recently announced, and it's really starting to get underway. And I think that's where having an agency like that in Winnipeg, of all places, is a really prideful thing for Manitobans, but also can show that we can be sort of the catalyst and the driving force within Canada to show and to protect water across the country. It's a really good opportunity to do that. And I think a lot of that is also with the laws that we put in place. So, illegal dumping, for example, is one of them. And that's a practice that still does occur in Winnipeg quite frequently. So thinking of things like that, as well as also, on the coast, cruise ships dump a lot, right? And vessels do also emit a lot of pollutants that affect southern resident killer whales, for example. Their noises also, mess with their echolocation or their ability to communicate with one another. It's things like that we have to really be serious about. And I think we've discussed sort of what the issues are and how we want to tackle them, and we have a plan. And I think that's the most important thing here is we have a plan. We've identified what it is we want to take care of and look after, and we're going to do that.
Thank you so much, Raul. Leah?
Thank you so much, Chris, for that question. I just here for proportional representation. You know, one of the concerns I have going back to all the announcements from the Liberals and the Conservatives about extraction when we're talking about protecting fresh water, which is becoming the biggest challenge of our time, is nobody's talking about the amount of water that it takes for mining. You know, we cannot live without water. And all the plans that are being proposed by the Liberals and Conservatives will take an enormous amount of fresh water, whether it's LNG, the water that's needed for LNG, or all the mining extraction projects. It places fresh water at risk. And we see the most harmful impacts around First Nations, many that still have a clean boil water advisories. We can talk about building pipelines to Timbuktu, but yet so many Indigenous communities around this country are not provided with their right. Water, access to clean water is a human right. In Quebec, they call for the protection of fresh water. That is something that we need to adopt nationwide to protect fresh water, that any sort of development has to be in respect of making sure that we do not jeopardize clean water sources, that we don't end up with situations like Shoal Lake, Florida, where they have boil water advisories, yet they're providing Winnipeg with fresh water. And we know who gets impacted the most by it. And it's the poorest communities around the country. I say this because we talk about fresh water, and I know that the Liberal government put forward a bill, a fresh water bill, but it was stalled because the Liberal government in that instance did not do adequate consultations with Indigenous communities and force them to have to push back. It was something that was done about us, without us. So that needs to be done also to protect fresh water in consultation, proper consultation with Indigenous communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Janine?
I just have to say, Leah, I completely agree. If there was true consultation, we would not have the terrible situation which currently exists with so many First Nations not having access to drinking water, the healthy drinking water, because the consultations are not taking place or only taking place in lip service and not really, that we have this situation. The Green Party totally supports that the priority of all First Nations having access to clean drinking water. We also think that federally we should be supporting every province in updating and improving their Environmental Act. Right now, the Environmental Act in Manitoba, you can drive a truck through. You know, we had to work so hard, those of us with our line in the sand, Manitoba, stopping the CO silica mining through the drinking water of all of Southeast Manitoba. And it looks like they're going to come in through the back door, maybe through Brokenhead, through misinforming the people there, and try and do it again because they think the silica sand, which is used in fracking, is going to make them money. But that fresh drinking water is priceless. All life depends on it, and we're not treating our water like the priceless resource that it is. It's being made into a commodity for corporations, and I completely agree with Leah when she speaks to the amount of water wasted in mining. Not only do we need to redo our environmental acts across the country, we need to have a consistent mining act that respects the environment and respects the First Nations around, because very often It's the people in the small outlying communities that have the most negative impacts of the mining, of the tailings and the tailing ponds, that can't eat the fish, that can't eat the game, all of the problems that come from the pollution. So there's a way that we can work together. The Green Party is all about building bridges, working together to ensure that we have the resources that we need for a healthy life without stealing from the future, honoring the past, honoring the fact that First Nations were able to live here for thousands of years without desecrating the land. And the settler communities, within 300 years, we have soil destroyed, we have bison killed, we have water polluted, communities without fresh drinking water. We need to turn that around and ensure that we respect clean drinking water for all, and that we have environmental acts and mining acts that respect the greater good and not just the short-term profit of the corporations. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Someone has put in a question in the chat, and I will read it out. My Tagalog's not that perfect, but I'll just start with good evening to everyone. I'm a first-generation immigrant from the Philippines, and growing up there over the archipelagic geography structure makes us susceptible to natural disasters. And as a concerned citizen not residing in Manitoba, how will your party protect Canada's nature and biodiversity against natural disasters, particularly during wildfire seasons? I will pass it to Janine again.
Well, thank you. That's an excellent question. And if we were to follow First Nations management of forests, we would not be having such huge wildfire problems as we are. Not only is it a problem for not managing the forests in the traditional way, which do controlled burns and protect areas so that they're not the huge conflagration of fires that happen now. So there's traditional knowledge that we can cause on there. We also know that when you clear cut, when you monocrop, when you take away the streams and don't protect the riparian areas and you take down all the trees, the water just rushes down, and then you also have flooding. So were you to support a more organic agriculture, a taxation system that reduces taxes on wildlands, on farms, on riparian areas on farms, on the treed areas on farms, so that farmers don't have to clear cut in order to make more money, that we need to be supporting the bioregions and the truth of the way the water is flowing through the watersheds, and how our agriculture works with the watersheds and the bioregions rather than trying to dominate it, that these are ways that can reduce both flooding and fire and help bring us to a culture that works more collegially with each other and with the natural world, as opposed to this extractive capitalist system of dog eat dog and that might is right. We have to understand that we have existed and life has developed and existed on this precious turtle island for us because of cooperation, because of our ability to work together. And the Green Party urges us, yes, we desperately need proportional representation so we can put our heads together around the table with greater diversity and come up with more creative problems to protect our water and to protect our environments from the kinds of extreme weather events that are causing so much destruction. A lot of those extreme weather events are coming from our improper management of our plains, of our agriculture, of our forests. We can do better, and we must do better for future generations. Thank you, Chris.
Leah, go ahead.
Well, just building on that, corporate greed and capitalism is what is destroying Mother Earth. And we often think of Turtle Island or Canada as an isolated place, but we're all related together, and the decisions we make here impact other areas of the world, including the global south. I really appreciated that question. Canada and the North the northern parts of the globe are responsible for a lot of the climate issues that are now being experienced in the global south. Yeah, we need real environmental stewardship. We have no choice but to meet climate targets. And we know how to do it. I mean, I don't think it's that we lack the knowledge to be able to protect the earth. It's that we lack political will. We pick and choose what to uphold based on economic interests, what human rights to uphold based on politics and economic interest. You cannot brush aside human rights anymore for economic and political interest. And at the same time we're doing that, we are shutting our borders. We are going into a time of greater climate catastrophe. And we are shutting our borders to what could potentially be many environmental refugees needing to come to Canada. And I share that because much of the havoc we're putting on the South is creating unlivable spaces in the globe. We have a global duty to uphold our climate targets. We have a duty to protect biodiversity. And again, I say, we can talk about the solutions. It's not a lack of solutions and knowledge. It's a lack of political will that's being run over by corporate greed and capitalism. And I can tell you the Liberal government, all due respect, has a history of placating to corporate interests, including providing subsidies to fossil fuels. And let's not forget the first bailout during the pandemic was to big oil. Thank you.
Rahul?
Thank you very much for the question. I would say that our government has done quite a bit in terms of being able to adapt. And if you look at Canada especially, we are one of the nations that gets most affected from climate change. And as a young person, we can definitely feel that for sure. So I would say that this Liberal government that we've had initiated the development of Canada's first ever national adaptation strategy. Looking forward to the future of how we're going to be able to, mitigate disasters and be able to be ready for it to be preventative measures, but also reactionary measures too. And that's important in a landscape we're given that we might not always be in control of the situation. And that's why the government invested over $3.4 billion for DMAF, which is the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund. This will ensure that Canadians are prepared and protected from the impacts of climate change. And these are investments that are happening right now as we speak and that are continuously going because we are very serious about protecting and preserving what we have in Canada. It's very important. And in fact, we're going that step further. We can take the lessons that we learned from Jasper and see that how we can invest into well-resourced forces that can respond to what happens. That includes equipping Parks Canada with the wildlife response teams. They'll have additional training, modern firefighting equipment to help with the wildfire threats. They'll increase, fire smart programs to help strategic debris cleaning, controlled burns, evacuation planning as well within national parks, but also within the local areas to help locals and Indigenous peoples as well. We're going to update building codes as well to help with infrastructure standards in old construction, but new construction as well, and climate resilient design so that it accounts for all the climate risks that we'll be experiencing. So this is what the Liberals have laid out. We have plans and methodically reached out how we can be able to protect Canada's nature diversity against wildfires in particular, but also all natural disasters. We've been really, really good with hitting our mark. And unfortunately, the Conservatives have never been able to do that.
The next question is also in the chat. I will pass it on to Anne to read it out loud.
Yeah, okay. But before we have that, before I read that question, Alistair, do you have any follow-up questions? Did your question get answered?
Wala na po akong follow-up question. Salamat po.
Yeah, Thank you so much. That's an excellent one. Okay, moving on to the question asked by All Climate. Thank you for this. The question is on the chat. How will your party deal with our provinces? Quote, enclosed Manitoba Hydro and provincial government proposal to save winter power shortages by investing in $1.4 billion generating station that runs on natural gas instead of renewables. Do you support their proposal? And she attached this. There is a link about the news on Manitoba Hydro proposal fuel burning generating station to save off winter power shortages and the same chat. Yeah, and I think Rahul first.
Perfect. Look, all transitions need to happen to have the lowest impact on both the environment, but also people's access to energy. We need to balance this transition by working in partnership with the provincial government. And the Liberal government works very well with all levels of government, but particularly with the provincial NDP. We've worked with many different levels on many different issues, and we'll be in the position to continue collaborating in a positive manner to find solutions regarding this.
Next would be Leah.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say, we're talking about, the climate crisis. The Liberal government has committed $3.4 million for climate mitigation, yet they've spent over $34 billion for a pipeline. And certainly 3.4 million wouldn't even pay for Jasper, just on a side note. But we have to remember that in Manitoba, hydro has been the cash cow for the province. But it's been built on the backs of Indigenous communities. Let's not forget that Manitoba Hydro has built hydroelectricity, yet First Nations in Manitoba have the second worst housing conditions in the whole country, the second worst housing conditions in the whole country. So no sort of development amount Manitoba Hydro should happen without the free, prior, and informed consent and consultation with Indigenous nations. I say that because if you take the same sort of dependence on hydroelectricity and you compare it to the James Bay Cree in the north that built their agreements grounded in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Nothing happens without the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples. They've been able to leverage that now to move out of a reliance on, for example, mining and extraction because of resource revenue sharing. The problem in Manitoba is the federal government often negotiates with provinces and skips out their constitutional obligations to free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples. And what does that look like? No access to clean drinking water, impacts on the natural environment, poor housing conditions, and ongoing violence against Indigenous women and girls in man camps and construction companies that are built on the backs on the resources of Indigenous people. Thank you.
And lastly,
Here.
Janine.
Yes, completely agree with the issues that Leah brings forth. I am ashamed of the idea that we are going to use natural gas, which is more polluting, to supplement our hydroelectricity. That is ridiculous. Why are we not investing in solar and wind? We could also have, like the little place where I grew up, where my grandpa as a settler farmed for 67 years, got 67 years of crop off. Minnedosa has its own little miniature hydroelectricity plant that's all decommissioned. So there's those kinds of small scales all across the province that could do local business development, but always with well-informed, prior and informed consent from the First Nations people around. If they truly did the final true consultation, we would not be making such ridiculous proposals as to use natural gas in this way. It is just shameful. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing your questions. We will end the questions and answer period now, so we can enter into final statements, and then our president, June Salas, will say closing statements from the board. And so I do want to just share that I had like I think six more or five more questions, but that will be saved for the next forum. So thank you so much again, and we will start off with we'll have Rahul start us off in final statements.
Thanks, Chris. Look, I'm a young person, and I'm aware of the climate emergency. I'm aware that it affects me directly, and it'll affect my kids even greater. We talked about a lot of important things, but I was hoping that we would focus more on our platforms and plans for the environment by answering the questions directly. Instead of saying what, we aren't doing, we should be talking about what we're going to do. And I feel that the Liberals are really talking about that mostly. We're in a time of action, and we should be collaborating on policies. And Mark Carney and myself have laid out what and how we'll protect Canada and the environment. Right now, we need serious leaders and serious members for a very serious time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Leah, go ahead.
Mabuhay, everybody, for this wonderful discussion. We are experiencing the greatest crisis of our time, and we need strong voices in the House of Commons that will not bow down to corporations, that will not bow down to a capitalist interest, and that will always be rooted and grounded in human rights. The human right to a safe, clean, and sustainable environment as a human right, something that is recognized in over 100 countries in the world. The human right to safety and security, something not being experienced by many Black and racialized and Indigenous peoples, particularly when we're talking about resource extraction, whether it is in Canada, around Indigenous communities, Guatemala, or in the Philippines. We must protect the human rights of individuals from corporations that wreak havoc on our Mother Earth and cause violence to our communities. We need strong voices that are grounded in experience and a proven track record for standing up for the environment and never backing down to a fight when necessary, especially pushing against a federal government that continues to provide substitute fossil fuel subsidies and continues to invest in an unsustainable pipeline, turning their back on a green economy. I hope to be that choice in this upcoming election in Winnipeg Centre. Being your representative has been the honor of my life. Thank you.
And then lastly, Janine, go ahead.
Thank you so much. The Green Party will continue to push the envelope in terms of asking for both environmental and social justice. This is important. We cannot separate how we treat one another from how we treat the earth around us and how we treat all our relations, because we are all related. All life needs to be honored. We need to move away from this fear-based, extractive culture that pits us against each other to one where we work together, where we build bridges, where we take a collegial approach, where we update our democracy to be one that is away from first past the post, might is right, to truly proportional representation where all voices are honored and listened to. And the Green Party will continue to challenge the power possessing beings, whatever level of decision making, to remember the environment, to remember that we as human beings are not separate from the natural world, that we need to treat each other and the environment with the utmost respect. And thank you very much to everyone. Sincere miigwech and merci to all of you for organizing this event and coming and sharing with us tonight. This is the way that we work for change, and you have my respect.
Thank you all so much. I'll say my final statements here is the work that I've been doing in Kami has been working with urban indigenous young people of the North End. And one thing I've learned is language is so important. And I kind of regret not saying the Tagalog from Alistair's question, but I'm going to say it here because I actually know how to say those words. Mabuhay, maganda gabi po sa inyong lahat. So again, language is so important. And for me, not
Yes.
knowing a language is something I want to learn. So thank
Yeah.
you for SEM, seeing our community, the Filipino community, take up leadership in environment issues is something I'm so proud of. So thank you so much. And I want to thank June Salas for allowing me to be the youth representative of the group. So June, close us off.
Thank you very much, Chris. And yeah, before I make my closing remarks, I'd like to request the participants to put in the chat their contact information. We'll update you on our future activities, and yeah, thank you very much. But okay, so as we conclude this insightful discussion tonight, I'd like to thank all our federal political party candidates, Janine Gibson from Green Party of Canada, Rahul Walia from Liberal Party of Canada, and Leah Gazan from New Democratic Party, and the participants who have contributed to tonight's important discussions. Your perspectives and commitment to sustainability, social and environmental justice have made this discussion meaningful and impactful. Earth Day 2025 reminds us that building a sustainable, prosperous, and climate resilient future is a shared responsibility. The ideas shared tonight reinforce that collaboration across all sectors and political affiliations is key to driving positive change for our planet. So let's carry forward the momentum from this forum and turn our discussions into action. Together, we shape policies, inspire communities, and build a greener, more prosperous, and climate resilient Manitoba and Canada for the benefit of future generations. Thank you all for your time, dedication, and engagement. We look forward to continuing this journey toward a better future. Have a great evening.
And just before everyone leaves, just want to let you know that we have social media. We have a Facebook account and Instagram. Please follow us. And you can also look us up on our website at seminc. I think org, if I'm correct. So yes, .org. So keep in touch and thank you so much. And remember to vote April 28th, 2025.
Do we
Thanks,
have one
everyone.
more photo before we drop off?
Thank
Ready?
you.
Everybody, 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more. Those are one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you so much. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you. Good
Thank
to see you
you.
again, Leah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, see you later, everybody. Bye.
Take
Bye.
care.
Board, want to stay online for a bit?
Yeah,
Board?
yes, stay online, the members board. Thank you.
Thanks,
I-
Leah.
So yeah, thank you very much. Congratulations.
Oh, sorry, I'm still trying to get
Oh,
it.
okay. No problem.
Oh, I'm
Thanks.
still here. Oh, I will get it. Don't worry.
That's
And
okay.
can
Thank you
you
very
stop the
much.
recording? Thank you.
Oh, yes. Second.